Good morning. Good morning. Thought I would do a little Bible study with you guys today. I saw something here in First Samuel that I've never seen before, and I just wanted to share it with you. So, this is a very familiar story, David and Goliath, and it's a very cool story, a very inspiring story. What I have never seen before today is the way in which this story provides a typological picture of the incarnation and the ministry of Jesus um, through this picture of David. Now, in terms of typology, David is the person who's often pointed to as a Christ figure, type of Christ. He's a righteous king. Um, he's a he's taking territory for Israel. He's a man after God's own heart. He is a worshiper, and so we see Jesus as this Christ type. But I saw a specific way in which this picture of David and Goliath here in 1 Samuel 17 actually shows how Jesus, in a spiritual way, fulfilled this story by his incarnation, his ministry, his death, and resurrection. So let's jump into it quickly. So the Philistines, which represents the enemy of God's covenant people, they had gathered their forces for war and assembled at Soko in Judah. And they pitched their camp at Ephes Damim, between Soko and Azekah. So the Philistines are here on this side of the valley, and the Israelites, it says, were on another side of the valley. Both of them were on an elevated place on a hilltop with a valley between them. So a champion named Goliath, who was from Gath, and he was, like, the picture is this huge, huge guy with a spear like a weaver's rod with a 15-pound head, scale armor. And when you see the word scale, think about the scales of a dragon or a serpent. So the word scales is often used to think about the world and sin and the protection of evil or darkness or deception. And it says later in the book of Acts that when Paul was prayed for, scales fell from his eyes. So he has got the scale armor, he's got bronze greaves, the bronze javelin, a spear shaft like a weaver's rod, and he comes out and he defies the armies of God. So you have this enemy champion, this picture of evil, demonic darkness coming out and defying God and God's people. And so they're for 40 days, which is a significant number. For 40 days, they are sending out Goliath. He's coming out into the valley from his elevated place to a lower place. He's challenging God's people, and and nobody is able to go out and fight him. So all of God's people are running scared. And when I think about Goliath as a type of satanic enemy, maybe Satan himself, and I think about the ways in which God's people often run afraid and scared and hide from evil or from the evil one, I think about this picture. And so there's a young man who's already been anointed king to replace Saul. His name is David, and he's a shepherd for his father in Bethlehem. And Bethlehem is where Jesus also came from. Bethlehem is called the house of bread. And his father Jesse says to his son David, take this ephah of roasted grain and these 10 loaves of bread to your brothers and hurry to their camp. So a father literally sends a son from Bethlehem to the front lines of an army from the house of bread with loaves of bread to encourage brothers who would not be friendly to his appearance. In fact, later we would see one of his brothers opposing him. And we can see the ways that when Jesus brought heavenly bread to his brothers, in on the front lines of the battle, many opposed him, and so he goes out as directed. He leaves the sheep with an under shepherd. So Jesse is like the main shepherd. He leaves it with another shepherd. He goes to the front line and he begins hearing about the oppression of the enemy against God's people. And it moves his heart with faith to do something about a problem which seems impossible for somebody in his position and stature to do. Jesus came humbled. He took on the form of a servant. He looked like nothing. People said, can anything good come out of Galilee? He was from Bethlehem. He brought spiritual bread to God's people, and he wanted to do something about the oppressive, evil enemy that had come against God's people. And people thought that the main oppressor at that time was Rome. In fact, the main oppressor was sin and the devil. And so he wasn't just coming to deal with the empire of Rome, he was coming to deal with the empire of sin. There was a prophecy in the book of Genesis that the serpent, which represents Satan, would bruise the heel of the man, but the man would crush the head of the serpent. And that's going to be important here in a moment. So he begins asking, what would the king give to somebody who defeats this champion? They say, well, they would give a great reward, and the king would also give a bride. So Jesus came, and for the joy set before him, he endured the cross. Jesus has a great reward, which is all of us. We are his treasure and his reward. But also, all of us who believe in Jesus make up what's called the bride of Christ. And so just like Saul was going to give a bride to the champion who could defeat Goliath, so also the Father has given the Son the bride of Christ as a pure and spotless bride. Though sometimes, just like the son or the daughter of Saul was not always on David's side, was sometimes opposing him. So often we also, as the bride of Christ, are sometimes faithless and opposing Jesus. But he's coming for his bride, and so he decides to go out against the giant. He goes to the king. He says, I'm going to go out, and with the same power that God gave me when I came against the bear and the lion, that's the same power that God is going to give me when I come against this giant. And Saul says, well, you're not able to, but if you really believe that God will do this for you, then here, go in my armor. And David says, I'm not used to this kind of armor. And Jesus in the same way says, I'm not used to this way of saving people. I have a different way of saving people, and it's really through faith. So David's choice to go out into the battle without armor, it demonstrates faith. It says he chooses 5 smooth stones, and he's going to kill the giant with a stone. And it's interesting that Jesus is called the rock of offense. It's the rock that people stumbled on, and the rock on whom people were under whom people were crushed. And so Jesus is the stumbling stone, but he's also a cornerstone, and he comes to make us all living stones built together into a house. So there's a lot of ways in which rocks are a symbol of the king and the kingdom. In later in the book of Daniel, Nebuchadnezzar would have a dream about a rock that planted itself in the heart of the earth and grew to become a mountain that supplanted all the other kingdoms of the earth. And that was an early picture of the kingdom of God. So David is going to use a small rock to make a big impact against the enemy of Israel. So he slings a rock into the head of the giant, and it says it sinks into his forehead. Now, the head in biblical imagery is a picture of leadership and a picture of authority. And so, if a stone sinks into the head and destroys the head of someone, it's destroying the mind, the command center, the leadership and the authority of that thing. So this Christ type destroys the enemy with a stone, and he falls face down. So the face goes down into the earth. In my mind, that brings up a picture of shame and being defeated. And he runs up, he kills the giant, and then cuts off his head. So he doesn't just bruise the head, he actually destroys and cuts off the head. And that's just what Jesus did to the enemy. On the cross, he defeated him. His the rock of his authority, his church, and his kingdom destroyed the head of the serpent, and Jesus has cut off the head of the serpent. And so the authority is no longer there. And in fact, Jesus later says, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Satan offered that authority in the wilderness, and Jesus rejected receiving that authority through human means or by worshiping Satan, but received it later through his death and resurrection, his obedience to God. And so the picture of David and Goliath is a picture of God getting his victory over his enemies by sending a son from the house of bread, with bread to nourish and encourage God's children, with faith to win God's battles, and with power to destroy the head of the evil one. And because the head of this giant was cut off, fear hit the enemy camp, and all of the smaller enemies began to scatter and run, and all of God's people then were encouraged, strengthened, and mobilized to go out and fight against the evil one, which is actually what we get to do when Jesus, the forerunner, the author and perfecter of our faith, our elder brother, destroyed the headship of Satan over God's people, over the earth. Then we are actually seeing fear enter the ranks of the enemy, and even though we are waiting for the final culmination of that victory when Jesus returns, we see now ways in which when God's people rise up and have faith, they're able to do much the same as David did, as Jesus did. We're able to strike the head of the enemy. We're able to see God bring fear into the enemy camp, and we're able to rout the enemy, not because we have strength or armor, um, because we have that single smooth stone of Jesus himself, who is the chief cornerstone, the rock that the builders rejected, the rock on which the church is founded. He himself goes before us and destroys the enemy. And so hope that's an encouragement to you. Saw the spiritual theology here in 1 Samuel 17. God bless you, and have a great day.